The snow began falling just after sunset, covering the streets of Chicago in a blanket of white that softened everything, except the loneliness. Christmas lights glowed in apartment windows. Families hurried home carrying wrapped presents, and children pressed their noses against frosted glass waiting for Santa Claus. For Officer Daniel Brooks, Christmas Eve was simply another shift. At 42 years old, Daniel had spent more than 2 decades wearing the Chicago Police Department badge. He had seen the city at its best and its worst. He had rescued children from house fires, talked frightened teenagers out of dangerous situations, and comforted families after tragedies no one should ever experience. People at the precinct often joked that Daniel had 2 hearts, one for the job and another for everyone he met. He smiled politely whenever they said it. The truth was much simpler. He knew what it felt like to lose everything. 5 years earlier, his wife Emily had died after a long battle with ovarian cancer. They had dreamed of filling their little brick house with children, but life had other plans. They had never been able to have a family of their own. After Emily's funeral, the silence inside their home became unbearable. Every room reminded him of promises they would never keep. He kept her favorite rocking chair in the living room. He couldn't bring himself to move it. The only soul waiting for him every night was Max, a gray-faced Labrador retriever Emily had rescued from an animal shelter years before. Daniel often joked that Max had become his roommate. In truth, Max had become his family. That Christmas Eve began like hundreds before it. Daniel poured himself stale coffee at the precinct while younger officers laughed about holiday dinners, waiting for them after their shifts. Officer Jake Morales grinned. "You know, Brooks, one of these years you've got to stop volunteering for Christmas." Daniel shrugged. "Someone has to." Jake smiled knowingly. "No, you just don't like going home to an empty house." Daniel looked into his coffee. Jake instantly regretted saying it. "I'm sorry." Daniel forced a small smile. "It's all right." The radio crackled. Unit 12, possible disturbance behind St. Matthew's Church. Neighbor reports hearing a baby crying. Daniel immediately reached for his keys. "I've got it." St. Matthew's Church had been abandoned for almost 10 years. The old stone building stood forgotten between warehouses on the south side of the city. Snow drifted through broken stained glass windows. The wind howled through empty halls like distant voices. Daniel stepped carefully through knee-deep snow. At first, nothing, only silence. Then, a faint cry. Tiny, weak, almost swallowed by the wind. His heartbeat quickened. "Hello?" No answer. Again. A baby's cry. Daniel followed the sound behind the church. Near a rusted dumpster sat an old cardboard box already covered in snow. His stomach dropped. He knelt beside it. Inside, a newborn baby, wrapped in a faded blue blanket. His tiny cheeks were pale. His little hands were turning blue from the cold. "Oh my God!" Without thinking, Daniel ripped off his heavy police jacket and wrapped the baby inside. The infant's crying slowly faded. Tiny fingers instinctively grabbed Daniel's shirt. Daniel felt something shift deep inside him. He whispered softly, "It's okay, little guy. I've got you." For the first time that night, the baby opened his eyes. Bright blue, calm, as if somehow he already trusted the stranger holding him. The ambulance arrived within minutes. Paramedic Lisa Carter rushed over. "How long has he been out here?" "I don't know." She quickly checked the baby's pulse. Her expression grew serious. "We need to move." Inside the ambulance, warm blankets surrounded the infant while heaters blasted hot air. Daniel refused to leave. The paramedic smiled. "You can ride with us." Daniel nodded. He never let go of the baby's tiny hand. At Mercy General Hospital, doctors worked frantically. Hypothermia, severe dehydration, low oxygen. Daniel paced outside the emergency room for over 2 hours. Finally, Dr. Sarah Bennett stepped into the hallway. She removed her gloves. "You found him?" Daniel nodded. "Is he—" She smiled gently. "He's going to live." Daniel closed his eyes in relief. Then the doctor added quietly, "If you'd found him even 5 minutes later." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Police investigators searched the area for days. No witnesses. No security cameras. No fingerprints. The cardboard box came from an ordinary grocery store. The blanket had no identifying tags. The child had no birth certificate. No hospital bracelet. Nothing, except one small silver bracelet around his tiny wrist, engraved with one word, hope. Detectives believed it might be the baby's name. Or perhaps the last thing his mother wanted him to have. Hope. The story quickly spread across local news stations. Chicago police officer saves abandoned Christmas baby. People donated diapers, blankets, clothes, stuffed animals. Hundreds of families offered to adopt him. Yet every evening after finishing his shift, Officer Daniel Brooks quietly visited the hospital. He never told anyone. He simply sat beside the baby's crib, sometimes reading children's books, sometimes talking about his day, sometimes sitting in complete silence. The nurses began expecting him. One evening, Nurse Maria laughed. "You know," Daniel looked up, "I think he knows your voice." "What do you mean?" "Watch." She gently picked up the baby. The infant fussed for a moment. Daniel spoke softly. "Hey there, buddy." Immediately, the baby turned toward him, stopped crying, and smiled. The nurses exchanged glances. Maria grinned. "I've seen that look before." Daniel chuckled. "What look?" "The one babies save for their parents." Daniel looked away. "I'm not his father." "No," Maria replied quietly. "But maybe someday." Weeks passed. The police investigation reached a dead end. No missing newborn reports matched. DNA databases revealed nothing. No relatives came forward. Every lead disappeared. Christmas became New Year's. Then January. Still, Daniel visited every evening. He brought storybooks, tiny socks, a stuffed elephant. The hospital staff started calling him Officer Dad. He pretended to hate the nickname. Secretly, he didn't. One snowy afternoon, Daniel found social worker Rebecca Collins waiting outside the nursery. She smiled warmly. "Officer Brooks?" "Yes?" "We need to discuss the baby's future." Daniel's heart sank. "Did someone claim him?" Rebecca shook her head. "No, but we're beginning adoption procedures." Daniel nodded. "That's good." She studied his face carefully. "You don't sound convinced." He looked through the nursery window. The baby was sleeping peacefully. He stopped. Rebecca waited. Finally, he whispered, "I don't want him growing up wondering if anyone ever wanted him." Rebecca smiled. "He won't." Daniel looked confused. She handed him a folder. Inside, adoption paperwork. "What is this?" Rebecca folded her hands. "The nurses tell me you visited 63 days in a row." Daniel blinked. "You counted?" "They did." She smiled. "They also said he smiles every time you walk into the room." Daniel laughed nervously. "I'm 42. I know. I'm a police officer. I know. I work nights. I know. I'm a widower." Rebecca nodded. "I know all of that." Daniel looked at the paperwork again. "I don't even know why you're showing me this." Rebecca's eyes softened. "Because every child deserves someone who chooses them." A long silence filled the room. "Finally," Daniel whispered, "I've never been anyone's father." Rebecca smiled. "Neither has every good father, until the day they become one." Daniel stared through the glass. The little boy slowly opened his eyes. As if sensing him nearby, the baby smiled. Daniel felt tears sting his eyes. For years, he'd gone home to an empty house, carrying memories that only brought pain. Now, for the first time since Emily's death, he imagined laughter echoing through those quiet rooms. He imagined bedtime stories, tiny footsteps racing down the hallway, a little voice calling him Dad. He looked back at Rebecca. His voice trembled. "What happens if I fill out these papers?" Rebecca smiled through tears. "Then we'll begin the process." Daniel picked up the pen. His hand shook as he wrote his name across the first page. It was the most important signature of his life. 3 months later, after home studies, interviews, and endless paperwork, the adoption was approved. The abandoned baby with the silver bracelet named Hope officially became Noah Daniel Brooks. On the day Daniel carried Noah home, neighbors lined the sidewalk and applauded. Max barked excitedly as the front door opened. Daniel gently placed Noah into the nursery he had spent weeks preparing, a room painted soft blue, with stars on the ceiling and a framed photo of Emily on the dresser. He looked at the picture and whispered, "I wish you could have met him. I think you would have loved him." Just as he leaned over to tuck Noah into his crib, headlights flashed across the living room window. A dark sedan sat across the street. Inside, someone watched the house in complete silence. After several long moments, the car slowly pulled away into the snowy night. Daniel never noticed, but somewhere in the darkness, someone knew exactly where little Noah Brooks had gone. The dark sedan disappeared into the snowy streets before dawn. Its driver never stepped out, never knocked on Daniel Brooks' door, never left a message. Only one pair of tear-filled eyes watched the little brick house from a distance before vanishing into the night. Inside the house, Daniel knew nothing about it. He was too busy trying to figure out how to be a father. The first week was chaos. Daniel quickly learned that police training had prepared him for armed suspects, car chases and emergencies, but not for a newborn who woke every 2 hours demanding a bottle. One morning, after barely sleeping, he walked into the kitchen carrying Noah with one arm while trying to make coffee with the other. Max sat nearby, watching every move like a concerned babysitter. Daniel yawned. "You know, Max, criminals are easier than babies." Max wagged his tail. Noah suddenly sneezed. Milk splashed all over Daniel's uniform. Daniel looked down at the stain. For a second, he burst into laughter. It was the first genuine laugh that had echoed through the house since Emily died. His fellow officers quickly noticed the change. Daniel no longer stayed late after work. He rushed home. His phone wallpaper changed from a picture of the Chicago skyline to a smiling baby with bright blue eyes. Officer Jake Morales couldn't resist teasing him. "So," Daniel looked up. "How many diapers yesterday?" Daniel sighed dramatically. "7. Jake laughed. "Only 7? Daniel shook his head. "Before lunch." The entire break room erupted with laughter. Captain Eleanor Grant smiled from across the room. "You've become a different man, Brooks." Daniel looked thoughtful. "I think," he smiled, "I've become the man I was supposed to be." Raising Noah alone wasn't easy. Finding childcare around unpredictable police shifts felt impossible. One afternoon, Daniel was called unexpectedly to assist in a hostage negotiation. He panicked. Who would watch Noah? Before he could make another phone call, his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Helen Carter, knocked on his door. She was 74, widowed, and had lived next door for nearly 30 years. Emily had often baked pies with her. Helen smiled warmly. "I heard you have a little visitor." Daniel opened the door nervously. "I don't want to inconvenience you." Helen gently reached for Noah. "Oh, sweetheart." She looked at the baby. "I've waited years to hear a baby crying in this neighborhood again." From that day on, Helen became Noah's honorary grandmother. Every afternoon she read stories, knitted tiny sweaters, spoiled him with homemade applesauce. Noah adored her. Months turned into years. The little boy who had once fit inside Daniel's police jacket now raced through the backyard chasing butterflies. He laughed constantly, asked endless questions, and somehow convinced Max to tolerate tea parties. One spring afternoon, Noah, now 5 years old, climbed onto Daniel's lap after dinner. "Dad?" Daniel looked up from his newspaper. "Yeah, buddy? Where was I before you found me?" The question froze the room. Daniel had known this day would come. He simply hadn't expected it so soon. He set the newspaper aside. "You remember the silver bracelet you always wear?" Noah nodded. Daniel gently held the bracelet. "It was on your wrist the night I found you." "You found me?" Daniel smiled softly. "Yes." "Where?" "Behind an old church." Noah looked confused. "So, my first mommy left me there?" Daniel felt his throat tighten. He chose his words carefully. "I don't know why she had to, but I believe she hoped someone would love you." Noah looked at him for a long moment, then wrapped his little arms around Daniel's neck. "You did. Daniel closed his eyes. Yes, I did. And I always will. That night, after Noah fell asleep, Daniel quietly sat in Emily's old rocking chair. He looked through the adoption documents again. Every report ended the same way. Birth parents, unknown. Sometimes he wondered, did Noah's mother survive? Did she think about her son every Christmas? Did she regret leaving him? Or had she never looked back? Daniel whispered into the empty room. If you're out there, I want you to know he's safe. Across town, inside a modest apartment, a woman carefully unfolded a newspaper clipping she had kept for years. Its faded headline read, "Police officer saves abandoned Christmas baby." She gently touched the photograph of Daniel holding infant Noah. Tears rolled down her face. I never stopped loving you, she whispered to herself. But I couldn't give you the life he could. She carefully placed the clipping back into a small wooden box. Inside the same box were dozens of birthday cards, every one addressed to Noah. None had ever been mailed. Years passed. Noah grew into a remarkable young man. At 10 years old, he was known throughout school for defending kids who were bullied. One afternoon, Daniel received a call from the principal. His heart sank. He expected trouble. Instead, the principal smiled. Your son stood up to 3 older boys who were picking on a first grader. Daniel looked worried. Was anyone hurt? No. What happened? The principal laughed. He simply stood between them and said, she read from her notes. If you want to scare somebody, scare someone your own size. Daniel couldn't help smiling. Sounds familiar. It should. He said he learned it from his dad. That evening, Daniel took Noah out for burgers. I'm proud of you. Noah shrugged. You always tell me. Daniel smiled. Being strong isn't about hurting people. It's about protecting people. Daniel nodded. Exactly. Noah looked thoughtful. Dad? What? When I grow up, I want to wear a badge like yours. Daniel stared silently. The words hit him harder than he expected. You do? Noah grinned. I want to help people. Like you. Daniel reached across the table and squeezed his son's hand. You'll be even better than me. At home later that night, Daniel opened a drawer looking for batteries. Something fell onto the floor. It was Noah's silver bracelet. The clasp had broken. Daniel picked it up carefully. For years, Noah had worn it every day. He planned to have it repaired. As he examined it under the kitchen light, something caught his eye. A tiny engraving hidden inside the clasp. So small he had never noticed it before. It wasn't just the word hope. There were tiny numbers beneath it. 2008. And one faintly scratched letter. E. Daniel frowned. He had never seen it before. What did it mean? A date? An initial? Or the first clue to Noah's past? Before he could think further, the phone rang. It was the evidence technician from the precinct. Daniel, I think you should bring that bracelet to us tomorrow. Why? We've got new imaging equipment. We might be able to recover markings that couldn't be seen before. Daniel looked once more at the bracelet resting in his palm. For the first time in 10 years, the mystery surrounding Noah's birth no longer felt impossible to solve. He had no idea that this tiny discovery would begin a chain of events, leading to a single letter, a letter that would one day change both their lives forever. The next morning, Daniel Brooks placed the tiny silver bracelet in a padded evidence envelope before leaving for the precinct. He had kept it safe for 10 years. It had become more than a piece of jewelry. It was the only connection Noah had to the family he had never known. As Daniel drove through downtown Chicago, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. At the forensic laboratory, evidence technician Mark Reynolds greeted him with a smile. You still hanging on to this little mystery? Daniel nodded. I've waited a decade for answers. Mark carefully placed the bracelet beneath a high-powered digital microscope. It's amazing what newer technology can reveal. The machine slowly scanned every scratch, every tiny imperfection. Minutes passed in silence. Then Mark leaned closer to the monitor. Daniel? What? I think we've found something. The inside of the bracelet contained microscopic engravings that had been hidden beneath years of wear. The first line read, hope. The second, 12:13 for the watt. But beneath those, another message slowly appeared, barely visible. EM. Daniel frowned. What does that mean? Mark shook his head. Could be initials. A mother. A father. A hospital. We don't know. Daniel stared at the tiny letters. After 10 years, this was the first real clue. That evening, Noah noticed Daniel sitting quietly at the kitchen table. Dad? Daniel smiled. Come here. Noah sat beside him. Daniel showed him the bracelet. We found something new. Noah's eyes widened. About my family? Maybe. What if they don't want me? Daniel immediately reached across the table. Listen to me. No matter what we discover, you are my son. No paper. No DNA test. No secret. Will ever change that. Noah smiled through watery eyes. I know. Then he hugged Daniel tightly. Neither of them noticed Max watching from the hallway, his tail gently wagging. Over the next several weeks, Daniel reopened the abandoned case. Although officially closed years earlier, his captain quietly gave him permission to investigate during his personal time. He visited every hospital in the Chicago area, every maternity ward, every church, every women's shelter operating on Christmas Eve 11 years earlier. Most records had long been archived. Some had been destroyed. Others revealed nothing. One rainy afternoon, Daniel visited St. Matthew's Church again. The abandoned building looked even older now. Nature had nearly reclaimed it. He stood behind the church where he'd found Noah all those years ago. Snow had been replaced by weeds, but the memories remained. He whispered softly, I promised I'd protect you. And I always will. As he turned to leave, an elderly groundskeeper called out, Officer? Daniel walked over. You used to come here years ago. Daniel nodded. I found a baby here. The old man smiled sadly. I remember. Daniel hesitated. Do you remember seeing anyone that night? The man thought carefully. There was... He paused. A woman. Daniel's heartbeat quickened. What did she look like? I couldn't see her face. She wore a dark coat. She was crying. She kept saying... The old man's voice softened. Please forgive me. Daniel stood frozen. You never told police? I did. They couldn't find her. I figured she'd disappeared forever. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. Someone had been there. Someone had watched. Someone had loved Noah enough to cry before walking away. For years, Daniel had imagined a heartless mother abandoning her child. Now, he wasn't so sure. Across the city, a woman stood outside a small apartment building holding a grocery bag. She looked older than her years. Her hands trembled. She stopped in front of a community bulletin board. A newspaper clipping had been pinned there. It showed Officer Daniel Brooks receiving a community service award. Beside him stood a smiling 11-year-old Noah. The woman gently touched Noah's picture. My beautiful boy, she whispered. I kept my promise. A passerby glanced at her. She quickly walked away. Meanwhile, Noah was growing into an extraordinary young man. At school, he excelled in science, played baseball, and volunteered at a local animal shelter every Saturday. His kindness reminded everyone of Daniel. One afternoon, while walking home, Noah noticed an elderly homeless veteran struggling to carry groceries. Without hesitation, Noah crossed the street. Sir, can I help you? The man smiled gratefully. No one's asked me that in a long time. Noah carried the bags all the way to the veterans' shelter. When Daniel heard about it later, he couldn't have been prouder. You know why people respect you? Noah shrugged. Because you see people everyone else ignores. Noah smiled. I learned that from you. Weeks later, Daniel received a call from Detective Lisa Monroe, who specialized in cold cases. I found something. Daniel drove to headquarters immediately. Lisa spread several old case files across her desk. There was another abandoned infant case. Same Christmas. Same neighborhood. Daniel frowned. What happened? The mother was found. She'd been living in a shelter. She left the baby because she feared an abusive boyfriend. Daniel listened carefully. Lisa continued, That case made me think, what if Noah's mother wasn't abandoning him? What if she was saving him? Daniel felt chills run down his spine. Everything he believed about that snowy Christmas Eve suddenly seemed uncertain. That night, Daniel opened Emily's old journal. Inside was something she had written years before her death. Love isn't measured by who gives birth to a child. It's measured by who stays when life becomes difficult. Daniel read the sentence again and again, then quietly looked toward Noah's bedroom upstairs. He whispered, "She would have loved you." The following Saturday morning, Daniel was washing his patrol car in the driveway when he noticed an envelope lying inside the mailbox. There was no stamp, no return address, just 3 handwritten words. For Officer Brooks. His heart began to pound. He slowly opened it. Inside, there was only a single photograph. It showed a young woman holding a newborn baby in a hospital bed. On the back, written in faded blue ink, were 7 haunting words. "Please tell him I never stopped loving him." Daniel's hands began to shake. There was no signature, no explanation. But for the first time in 11 years, he was holding proof that Noah's birth mother had existed. And somewhere, she was still thinking about the son she had been forced to leave behind. Daniel stood frozen in his driveway, staring at the photograph. The smiling young woman looked no older than 22. She cradled a newborn wrapped in a blue hospital blanket, the same shade as the blanket Noah had been wrapped in the night he was found. His hands trembled as he turned the photo over again. "Please tell him I never stopped loving him." No signature, no address, no clue who had delivered it. Daniel looked up and scanned the quiet street. Nothing. The mail carrier hadn't come yet. Whoever left the envelope had done it by hand. That evening, Noah noticed the photograph lying on the kitchen table. "Dad? Who's that?" Daniel took a slow breath. "I don't know for certain." Noah picked it up carefully. "You think she's my mom?" "I think she might be." For several seconds, Noah said nothing. He simply stared at the young woman's face. Finally, he whispered, "She looks kind." Daniel felt his heart ache. "I think so too." Noah traced the edge of the photograph with his finger. "Do you think she ever thinks about me?" Daniel answered without hesitation. Every single day. The next morning, Daniel brought the photograph to Detective Lisa Monroe. She examined it under forensic lighting. "There's something interesting." She pointed toward the corner. "The hospital logo." Daniel leaned closer. The image was faint, but visible enough. St. Catherine Medical Center. The hospital had closed nearly 12 years earlier. Its records had been transferred to a state archive. Daniel's pulse quickened. For the first time, they had a place to start. A week later, Daniel received permission to search the archived maternity records from December 2008. Thousands of files filled dusty shelves. Hours turned into days. Nothing matched. Then, just before closing time, an elderly records clerk approached. "Officer Brooks?" "Yes." "I remember that hospital." Daniel looked up. The nurses sometimes protected women escaping abusive relationships. They often registered patients under temporary names. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. "So the real records might be hidden?" The clerk nodded. If the mother was in danger, yes. Daniel left the archive with more questions than answers. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat on the back porch while Max rested beside him. Snowflakes drifted quietly through the air. He remembered the tiny baby he had found in that cardboard box. He remembered promising to keep him safe. Now another promise formed silently in his heart. "I'll find the truth." Meanwhile, Noah was preparing for his middle school's annual community service project. Students were asked to write about someone who inspired them. When presentation day arrived, Noah walked to the front of the classroom carrying a framed photograph. It was Daniel in his police uniform. "My hero isn't famous," Noah began. "He isn't rich. He doesn't wear a cape. But one Christmas Eve, he saved a baby's life." Several students smiled. Noah continued, "People say he adopted me. I don't see it that way. I think God picked him to be my dad." The classroom fell silent. Even the teacher wiped away a tear. When Daniel later watched a recording of the speech, he quietly turned away before Noah could see the tears in his own eyes. Days later, Detective Monroe called. "We found something." Daniel rushed to headquarters. She handed him a sealed folder. Inside was a protected patient file. Most of the information had been legally redacted, but one page remained. The patient had signed only 2 initials. EM. Daniel immediately remembered the engraving inside Noah's bracelet. The same initials. The file also contained one handwritten note from a hospital social worker. Patient refuses to identify child's father. States she fears for baby's life if location becomes known. Requests complete confidentiality. Daniel slowly lowered the page. This wasn't abandonment. This was desperation. Someone had been running from danger. That evening, Daniel shared only part of the truth with Noah. I think your birth mother was trying to protect you. Noah looked surprised. You mean, she didn't leave because she didn't love me? Daniel shook his head. I think she loved you more than herself. Noah sat quietly for a long time. Then tears rolled down his cheeks. For years, I thought maybe I wasn't good enough. Daniel immediately wrapped an arm around his son. You were always enough. You always will be. Across the city, inside a small apartment, a woman sat beside her window holding another photograph of baby Noah. She had watched him grow from afar for years. Newspaper clippings, school awards, pictures from community events. Every birthday, she wrote him a letter she never mailed. She whispered softly, You look so much like your father. Then she quickly corrected herself. No, you look like the man who raised you. She smiled through tears. Thank you, Daniel. A few days later, Daniel returned home after a long shift. As he stepped onto the porch, he noticed another envelope resting against the front door. Again, no stamp, no return address. Inside was a single handwritten letter, only one sentence. If you truly want the truth, come alone to St. Matthew's Church next Sunday at sunset. Daniel read it twice. Then a third time. His pulse raced. After 12 years of silence, someone was finally ready to talk. But he had no idea whether he was walking toward the answer or into a trap. Daniel barely slept the night before Sunday. The anonymous letter sat on his kitchen table, folded neatly beside a cup of untouched coffee. If you truly want the truth, come alone to St. Matthew's Church next Sunday at sunset. He had spent 23 years as a police officer. Every instinct told him it could be dangerous. Every instinct as a father told him he had to go. He didn't tell Noah the whole truth. Over breakfast, Noah noticed Daniel seemed distracted. You okay, Dad? Daniel forced a smile. Just a long day ahead. Noah nodded. Well, don't work too hard. Daniel smiled. I'll try. As Noah left for baseball practice, Daniel watched him from the porch. Whatever happens tonight, he thought, I'll protect him. Just like I promised. Sunday evening arrived. The sun dipped below the Chicago skyline, painting the snow-covered streets in shades of orange and gold. Daniel parked several blocks away from St. Matthew's Church. He wore plain clothes instead of his uniform. No badge, no weapon visible. Only the silver bracelet tucked safely into his coat pocket. The abandoned church looked exactly as it had 12 years earlier. Broken windows, cracked stone walls, silence. The same place where one life had ended and another had begun. Daniel stepped inside. Damn, he whispered. Dust floated through the fading light. No one. He waited. 5 minutes. 10. Then, soft footsteps echoed behind him. He slowly turned. An elderly nun stood near the entrance. She looked to be in her late 70s, leaning on a wooden cane. Her gentle eyes filled with emotion as she looked at Daniel. Officer Brooks? Daniel nodded cautiously. Yes. She smiled sadly. I've waited many years to meet you. My name is Sister Margaret. Daniel relaxed slightly. You sent the letters? She nodded. I did. Why now? Because someone asked me to. Daniel's heart pounded. Who? The nun looked toward the old altar. A young woman. 12 years ago. They sat together inside one of the broken pews. Sister Margaret spoke quietly. On Christmas Eve, a young pregnant woman came to our shelter. She was terrified, covered in bruises. Daniel remained silent. She kept saying one thing. He'll kill my baby if he finds us. Daniel swallowed hard. Who was he? Her boyfriend. The child's biological father. He belonged to a violent criminal gang. He had threatened to sell the baby through an illegal adoption network. Daniel's stomach turned. So she ran. The nun nodded. She had nowhere to go. Tears filled Sister Margaret's eyes. She gave birth alone, without family, without money, without hope. Daniel reached into his pocket and placed the silver bracelet on the pew. The bracelet? Sister Margaret smiled through tears. I gave it to her. She asked me what she should name the baby. I told her, whatever happens, never lose hope. So she had the word engraved. Daniel stared silently at the bracelet. For years, he had wondered where it came from. Now he knew. What happened after the birth? Daniel asked. The nun looked down. Her boyfriend found the shelter. He was looking for the baby. So, we helped her escape. She knew she couldn't keep running forever. She believed the safest place for her, son, was somewhere no one would ever think to look. Daniel closed his eyes. The church. Yes, Sister Margaret continued. She watched from across the street. I was with her. We saw your patrol car arrive. We watched you wrap that little baby inside your police jacket. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. She wanted to run to him, but she knew, if she did, the men following her would find the child. So she stayed hidden and cried. Daniel remembered the groundskeeper's words. Please forgive me. Now they made perfect sense. Is she alive? Daniel whispered. The nun nodded slowly. Yes. Daniel looked stunned. Where is she? Sister Margaret hesitated. I made her a promise. I wouldn't tell anyone. Not unless... Unless what? Unless she was ready. Daniel lowered his head. I don't want to force her. I just want Noah to know he was loved. Sister Margaret smiled. He already was. She reached into her bag. I have something for you. She handed Daniel a small wooden box. Inside were 12 birthday cards, each carefully sealed, each labeled age 1, age 2, age 3, all the way to age 12. Daniel's hands trembled. She wrote these? Every birthday, every Christmas. She never stopped thinking about him. Daniel opened the first envelope. Inside was a tiny handwritten note. Happy first birthday, my sweet boy. I hope someone kisses your forehead before you fall asleep tonight. I hope you laugh. I hope you're warm. Most of all, I hope you never believe I stopped loving you. Daniel could no longer hold back his tears. When he returned home later that night, Noah was waiting in the living room. You were gone a long time. Daniel sat beside him. I learned something important. What? Daniel handed Noah the first birthday card. Noah looked confused. Who's this from? Daniel whispered. I think it's from your mother. Noah carefully unfolded the letter. As he read, tears rolled silently down his face. For years he had carried one painful question in his heart. Why didn't she want me? Now, for the first time, he realized he had been asking the wrong question. She hadn't left because she didn't love him. She had left because she loved him enough to risk losing him forever. Noah looked at Daniel with trembling lips. Do you think I'll ever meet her? Daniel took a deep breath. I don't know. But I promise you this. If that day ever comes, you won't face it alone. Noah leaned against his father. Neither of them spoke. Outside, snow began to fall again, exactly as it had on the Christmas Eve that had brought them together. But across town, in a modest apartment, a woman sat by her window with tears in her eyes. She looked at an old calendar. Circled in red was a date only 3 weeks away. She whispered, It's time. Then she picked up a pen and began writing one final letter. The letter that would change Daniel and Noah's lives forever. 3 weeks passed in silence. Life slowly returned to normal. Daniel went back to work. Noah returned to school, baseball practice, and volunteering at the animal shelter. But every night before bed, Noah read one of the birthday letters his birth mother had written. Each letter carried the same message in different words. I loved you. I never forgot you. I prayed for you every single day. The pain Noah had carried for years slowly began to heal. For the first time in his life, he no longer felt abandoned. He felt loved. One cold January morning, Daniel was preparing breakfast when the doorbell rang. Standing on the porch was Sister Margaret. She looked exhausted. In her hands was a large white envelope. I promised her I would wait until today. Daniel immediately understood. It's from her? The elderly nun nodded. Yes. But before you read it, you should know she made me promise not to stop her. Daniel's heart tightened. What do you mean? Sister Margaret simply whispered. Read the letter. Daniel and Noah sat together at the kitchen table. The envelope was addressed in careful handwriting. To Officer Daniel Brooks, and to my son Noah. Daniel slowly unfolded the pages. The letter began. Dear Officer Brooks, you don't know me, although you changed my life 12 years ago. My name is Emma Mitchell. I am the woman who left my baby behind St. Matthew's Church on Christmas Eve. There isn't a single day that I haven't hated myself for that moment. If Noah ever believed I abandoned him because I didn't love him, then I have already failed as his mother. Daniel paused, fighting tears. Noah reached for his hand. Daniel continued reading. When Noah was born, I was only 21. His biological father controlled every part of my life. When I tried to leave, he beat me. When he learned I was pregnant, he told me the baby belonged to him, not to me. I knew if I stayed, my son would grow up surrounded by violence, so I ran. But he found me again. The sisters at St. Matthew's helped me hide. On Christmas Eve, they told me there was only one way to save Noah. Leave him somewhere he would be found immediately. I chose the church because I believed God would send someone kind. Daniel's voice broke. He remembered lifting the tiny baby from that cardboard box. He remembered whispering, I've got you. He had never known. Someone else had been praying for exactly that. The letter continued. From across the street, I watched you wrap my son in your police jacket. When you held him, I knew I had made the right choice. You looked at him the way every child deserves to be looked at. With love. Daniel wiped away tears. Noah was openly crying now. Emma's letter continued. For years, I followed your lives from a distance. I saw Noah's first baseball trophy in the newspaper. I saw the photograph of him hugging you after your community service award. I watched him become the little boy I dreamed he could be. I wanted to tell him the truth, but every year I was too afraid. Then came the paragraph that changed everything. 6 months ago, I was diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer. The doctors tell me I don't have much time left. I no longer fear for my own life. I only fear leaving this world without telling my son one thing. He was never unwanted. He was the greatest gift God ever gave me. The room fell silent. Even Max rested his head against Noah's knee as if he understood the sadness filling the house. At the bottom of the final page was one last request. If Noah is willing, I would like to meet him once. Only once. Not to become his mother. That place already belongs to you, Daniel. I simply want the chance to tell him I love him while he can still hear my voice. Whether he says yes or no, please tell him thank you for giving me a reason to keep living all these years. Signed, Emma Mitchell. Neither Daniel nor Noah spoke for several minutes. Finally, Noah looked up. His face was wet with tears. She's dying. Daniel nodded slowly. I'm afraid so. Noah stared at the letter. I spent years wishing I could ask her one question. What question? Daniel whispered. Why? He looked back at Daniel. I don't need to ask anymore. That evening, Noah stood in front of Emily's photograph in the living room. He had often spoken to the picture when he was younger, imagining the woman his father had loved. Softly, he whispered, I think you'd tell me to go. Daniel had quietly walked into the room. You talking to Mom? Noah smiled through tears. Yeah. Daniel looked at Emily's picture. I think she'd tell you the same thing. The next morning, Daniel called Sister Margaret. We'd like to meet Emma. The elderly nun's voice trembled with relief. I'll arrange it. There is one thing you should know. What? Emma is very weak. She asked for the meeting to happen at the hospice where she's staying. Daniel thanked her and hung up. He turned toward Noah. Are you ready? Noah took a deep breath. No. He smiled sadly. But I don't think anyone could ever be ready for this. 3 days later, father and son drove toward a quiet hospice on the outskirts of Chicago. Neither of them knew what they would say. Neither of them knew how the meeting would end. But inside room 214, a woman who had waited 12 years was holding a small teddy bear she had bought before Noah was born. She looked toward the door every few seconds, whispering the same words over and over. "Please let him come." As footsteps echoed down the hallway, there was a gentle knock on the door. Emma closed her eyes. The moment she had dreamed about for 12 long years had finally arrived. Daniel gently knocked on the door. For a moment, no one answered. Then a soft voice came from inside. "Come in." Daniel slowly opened the door. The room was quiet, filled with warm afternoon sunlight. A small vase of fresh white lilies sat on the windowsill. In the bed lay a woman who looked much older than her 33 years. Chemotherapy had taken most of her hair. Her face was pale. Her hands were thin. But the moment she saw Noah, her eyes filled with tears. She covered her mouth, unable to speak. Noah stood frozen beside Daniel. For 12 years, he had imagined this moment 1,000 different ways. None of those dreams had prepared him for reality. Emma whispered through trembling lips. "Noah?" He nodded. "Hi." Her tears fell freely. "You've grown so much. I almost didn't recognize you." Noah smiled nervously. "I guess." "That's what happens." A quiet laugh escaped Emma. It was followed by tears. "I've imagined hearing your voice every day." Daniel stepped back toward the window, giving them space. For several long moments, neither Noah nor Emma spoke. Finally, Noah took a careful step forward. "I read your letters." Emma looked down. "I wasn't sure you ever would." "I wrote one every birthday. I hoped somehow they'd find you." They did. Noah reached into his backpack and placed the worn stack of birthday letters on her bedside table. "I've read every one." Emma gently touched them. "They're a little wrinkled." Noah smiled. "Because I cried on most of them." Emma couldn't hold back anymore. She began sobbing. "I'm so sorry." So sorry." Noah slowly moved closer. "I used to think you didn't want me." Emma shook her head over and over. "No, never. I loved you before I even held you. I sang to you when you were still inside me. I dreamed about teaching you to ride a bike. I dreamed about your first day of school. I dreamed about birthdays." She looked away. "I just wasn't allowed to keep those dreams." The room fell silent. Then Noah asked the question that had lived inside his heart for years. "Did you ever celebrate my birthday?" Emma smiled through tears. "Every year." She pointed toward a small wooden chest beside the bed. Daniel opened it carefully. Inside were 12 wrapped birthday presents. One for every year Noah had been alive. Still unopened? Emma laughed softly. "I know they're all late. I kept hoping one day I'd get to give them to you." Noah couldn't stop crying. He hugged the box against his chest. "You remembered every birthday." Emma nodded. "Every single one." Daniel quietly wiped away his own tears. He looked around the room. On one wall hung dozens of newspaper clippings. Every article featured Noah. His baseball team, his science fair ribbon, his volunteer award, even Daniel's promotion ceremony. Emma smiled when she noticed Daniel looking. "I wanted to know he was happy." She looked at Daniel. "You gave him everything I couldn't." Daniel shook his head. "No, you gave him life. I was just lucky enough to raise him." Emma smiled. "No, you became his father. I'll never be able to thank you enough." Just then, Noah walked across the room. Without saying a word, he wrapped his arms around Emma. She froze in disbelief. Very slowly, she hugged him back. For the first time since the day he was born, a mother held her son again. Neither wanted to let go. The hospice nurse quietly stepped outside and gently closed the door behind her. Some moments were simply too sacred to interrupt. After several minutes, Noah whispered, "I don't blame you anymore." Emma closed her eyes. "You don't?" He shook his head. "You saved my life. And because of you," he looked toward Daniel, "I got him." Emma smiled through tears. "I prayed every Christmas that you'd say those words." Before leaving, Emma handed Noah the small teddy bear she had kept for 12 years. "I bought this before you were born. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away." Noah smiled. "I'm keeping it forever." She laughed. "You might think you're too old for teddy bears." "No," he smiled. "I think everyone needs something that reminds them they're loved." As evening approached, Daniel helped Noah carry the gifts to the car. Before getting inside, Emma called softly, "Officer Brooks?" Daniel turned around. She smiled. "I've spent 12 years wondering what kind of man found my son. Today, I finally know." She wiped away another tear. "He found the best father in the world." Daniel couldn't speak. He simply nodded. 2 weeks later, the phone rang just after sunrise. Daniel answered. It was Sister Margaret. Her voice trembled. Emma passed away peacefully during the night. Daniel closed his eyes. "Was anyone with her?" "Yes. She was holding Noah's teddy bear. And your family photograph." Daniel looked toward the living room. Noah was sitting on the couch, still smiling at one of Emma's birthday letters. Daniel quietly sat beside him. He didn't need to say anything. Noah looked into his father's eyes. He already knew. Tears filled his eyes. "She isn't hurting anymore," Daniel whispered. "No." Together they cried, not because they had lost someone, but because they had finally found her, only to say goodbye. That afternoon, Sister Margaret delivered one final envelope Emma had left behind. Across the front were the words, "To be opened after my funeral." Daniel looked at Noah. Noah slowly opened the envelope. Inside was one final handwritten letter, and a legal document that neither of them expected. It would change their future forever. The morning after Emma's funeral was gray and quiet. Rain tapped gently against the windows of Daniel's house. Neither he nor Noah had said much since returning home. Grief has a way of filling even the strongest hearts with silence. On the kitchen table rested the final envelope Emma had left behind. Across the front, in her neat handwriting, were the words, "To be opened after my funeral." Daniel looked at Noah. "You ready?" Noah took a deep breath. "I don't think I'll ever be ready, but let's do it." Inside was a handwritten letter. Folded beneath it was a legal document. Daniel unfolded the letter first. Emma had written, "My dearest Noah, if you're reading this, it means I finally have peace. Please don't spend your life mourning the years we lost. Celebrate the years you still have with the father who raised you. I gave you life. Daniel gave you a future. Never choose between us. Love us both." Noah wiped away tears as Daniel continued reading. "There is one last gift I want to leave you. 10 years ago, I began putting aside every dollar I could. I cleaned offices at night, worked in a bakery during the mornings, and sold handmade quilts on weekends. Every penny was saved for one purpose: your future." Daniel looked at the legal papers. It wasn't a fortune. It was a modest trust fund of $86,000, enough to help Noah attend college without crushing debt. Emma had sacrificed everything she had, even while fighting cancer. The letter continued. "Officer Brooks? No, I should call you Daniel. Thank you for keeping the promise I couldn't. You taught my son kindness instead of anger, compassion instead of fear, love instead of hatred. You didn't just save his life that Christmas Eve. You saved mine." Daniel's voice cracked. For the first time in years, he cried without trying to hide it. Noah quietly wrapped an arm around him. At the bottom of the letter was one final request. "If possible, please don't spend this money only on Noah. Use whatever remains to help another child who feels forgotten. No child should ever believe they are unwanted. Signed simply, with endless love, Emma." Several weeks passed. One evening, Daniel and Noah drove together to St. Matthew's Church. The abandoned building was scheduled to be demolished. They stood behind the spot where Daniel had found Noah 14 years earlier. Snowflakes drifted gently around them. Noah looked at the empty ground. "It's strange." "What is?" "This is where my life almost ended." Daniel smiled. "No, this is where it truly began." That night, father and son made a decision. Instead of keeping all of Emma's savings for themselves, they used part of it to establish a small nonprofit. They called it the Hope Foundation. Its mission was simple: support abandoned children, foster families, and single parents in crisis. The very first scholarship was awarded to a teenager aging out of foster care. Daniel personally handed him the certificate. He smiled and said the same words he had spoken to a freezing newborn years earlier. "I've got you." Years passed. Noah graduated from college with honors, just as he had promised when he was 10 years old. He entered the police academy. On graduation day, Daniel stood proudly in the front row. His hair had turned almost completely gray. His badge had long since been retired, but his heart had never felt younger. When Noah received his own badge, he walked directly to Daniel. Without saying a word, he pinned it onto his father's jacket, then hugged him tightly. The audience rose to its feet in applause. After the ceremony, a young reporter approached Noah. "Officer Brooks, one question. What inspired you to become a police officer?" Noah smiled. He looked toward Daniel, then answered, "Because one police officer once chose compassion over convenience. He didn't just rescue a baby. He became his father. I've spent my whole life trying to become the kind of man he already was." Daniel quietly wiped away another tear. Several months later, Noah responded to a late-night emergency call. Behind an old bus station, officers found a frightened little girl, no older than 4, alone and crying. She clutched a worn stuffed rabbit. The other officers searched for relatives. Noah knelt beside her. "Hey." She looked up with frightened eyes. "Are you cold?" She nodded. Without hesitation, Noah removed his own police jacket and wrapped it around her tiny shoulders. Daniel, now retired, watched the news report later that evening. He smiled through tears. History wasn't repeating itself. Love was. Every Christmas Eve, Daniel and Noah continued their tradition. They visited Emma's grave first. They left white lilies and a small teddy bear. Then they drove to St. Matthew's Church. Although the old church was gone, a small memorial stone stood in its place. It read, "Hope lives here, in honor of every child who deserved to be loved." One snowy Christmas Eve, Daniel stood quietly before the memorial. "I think she'd be proud of you," he said. Noah smiled. "I think she'd be proud of both of us." Daniel looked at the sky. "So do I." Epilogue. 5 years later. Daniel celebrated his 70th birthday surrounded by laughter. The house that had once been silent was now filled with family, friends, foster children, police officers, and volunteers from the Hope Foundation. Mrs. Helen Carter, now in her 80s, smiled proudly from her favorite chair. Max's framed photograph rested on the fireplace, remembered with love. Noah walked into the living room carrying a small wrapped box. "Happy birthday, Dad." Daniel laughed. "You didn't have to get me anything." "Oh, I did." Daniel opened the gift. Inside was the old silver bracelet, the one engraved with a single word, Hope. It had been restored and mounted inside a glass display case. Beneath it was a small engraved plaque. It read, "The night one police officer saved a baby was the night that baby saved him too." Daniel could no longer hold back his tears. He hugged Noah tightly. "You've made me the luckiest father in the world." Noah smiled. "No, Dad. You made me the luckiest son." Outside, snow began to fall, just as it had on that unforgettable Christmas Eve many years before. Some people believe miracles arrive with trumpets and bright lights. But sometimes, a miracle arrives wrapped in a worn blue blanket inside a cardboard box, waiting for one kind heart to whisper the words that change everything. "I've got you."